Go.
Welcome to Role Play Cafe. I am Dale, and this is to my left, Jason, or probably to his right himself.
Doesn't matter.
You get the picture. Two of them, as a matter of fact. Anyway, we're here today just to chew the fat about Dark Age of Man and some of our experiences, specifically with Peace. And I'm playing Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyper. I'll stop right there and just call it Ash. Because it gets me winded saying it. So, and previous experiences in different games.
Right.
To compare and contrast with the game that we're developing right now. It's thoughts in general.
Yeah.
All right. All right. You mentioned a second ago about role play, because last night I was very liberal, and not conservative in my role playing. All right, especially when I was playing the character I was when we were playing Peace. In those moments where I'm playing an aristocratic, arrogant arse, and there was a moment when, throughout the two sessions that we've had, I've been very vocal as far as the character in flaunting his aristocracy, his position, and playing on how he views himself in the world and how he affects the world. He doesn't mingle with the commoners so much as directs them and inspires them to greater heights, etc. So I was taking a lot of liberty in commanding my compatriots, but and in some games, you don't want to do this a lot when you're playing with other. Honestly, if I wasn't playing with you and David, and we wasn't more or less, in fact, I was playing to kind of test the limits and boundaries of that, because I had this in the back of my mind. When we're playing these really narrative heavy games, especially in Dark Age of Man, where there's not necessarily any procedures that kind of, you know what I mean? Like your turn here, this and that. When you have a kind of a belligerent character or somebody that's playing a character who is like the character I'm playing. I can't even remember his name. I know you do, Jason.
Abernathy.
Abernathy. Okay. So when you're playing with somebody like that, he has to act like an ass in a lot of respects.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question to you is, what gave you that? I mean, what gave you that direction? I would argue it's drive. It's the game demanding a drive. Correct?
Yeah.
Peace. For those of you who can't see this book, it's Peace. I'm not saying that you couldn't have been an arrogant nobleman in any other game, but Peace demands that we pick a drive. It demands that we connect to somebody in the group, right? And that allowed us in the first session to decide kind of our initial role play position, right? And then, of course, whether we were conflicted, right? Certainly my character conflicted with your character, as I don't believe in the authoritarian regime. I don't believe in and your character in a way represents that oppressive, noble culture. And so,
yes.
So as far as you role playing with us and pushing the boundaries of our culture or play, our group, that's a given. That's not a problem. But I guess what I'm saying is, did Peace inform you? Did the mechanics and the demands of Peace inform you of that?
I think myself, anytime I play character, whether or not I'm prompted by the rule set, which I do appreciate the fact that Peace welcomes and prompts a narrative exposition and type play for the players to elaborate on in character, in game. A lot of games don't really facilitate that or don't focus on that, but it does bring it into the forefront by having the prompt in the system to say, what are you there for? What are your drives, your motivations? Who are you connected to? How are you reacting toward each other? And then play. That's a welcome mat for narrative play.
Well,
to prompt somebody to do it.
And you're rewarded for it. you can earn battle
Oh yeah,
scars for it, which is a mechanical device that can help you survive.
yeah, and I could take that from the author Robert, that I knew that he, uh, as much as I've played it, I've seen people that really, there's a balancing act between the person that really loves the mechanical aspect of movement, of time, actions, focus type play, and the narrative is more of a peripheral. It's not brought to the forefront. The interaction between players and player characters within themselves and with the NPCs is almost secondary in nature. But I recognized in the game when Robert brought that out, he wants that brought into his game.
Right.
That experience.
His rule book is demanding that you think of this as a character, not just a method to activating the dice to win or solve a solution. You're a character in a world, in a place.
Yeah, a lot. I found a lot myself when I play. I automatically do this. I conceptualize the character, whether the game asks me or not. To probably the chagrin of my, the party at the table, if they're not.
So do I, but to that, to that end, if we just talked about, let's say, we've shared Lamentation of the Flame Princess, we've shared how many OSRs,
Fantasy.
We've shared old D&D games. Maybe we didn't play them together, but we share this as our history. We share this in common. What is in those games that supplies that information outside of vanity, outside of just saying, oh, I am this character, here, watch me play it. And it doesn't have any effect mechanically upon the game in any way, shape, or form. How many games do you think we've played that our role-playing is irrelevant? It doesn't have to exist at all.
A large portion, and like the last night's game, the red box that I started out on, I don't think, especially the days it wasn't even conceptualized that I would role play. Now, you said you had a different experience, and Todd has mentioned that he had a similar experience as yours, where the role play was front and center, and that's how you conceptualize the game.
Right.
I don't want to be speaking for you, but that's the way I took it from y'all, which really blew my mind, because in the game itself, it was totally mechanical, and I would play war games.
But would
so
you
it was easy transition? And
would you argue
stay that way?
Would you argue? Whether you choose to role play Monopoly or Axis and Allies when you're sitting around the table with your buddies, versus it being a demand, a part of the mechanics, part of the demand upon you, would you argue that there's no excuse for games not including it now? If you're going to call your thing a role-playing game, should it not demand some level of mechanic or some level of adherence to role-playing?
Logic would dictate that, and the only reason I'm hesitant about the reply is because I see games that are not, if you didn't role play, if role playing was a minimum, it's still serviceable to the people that enjoy playing that way, and it harkens back to a lot of the OSRs that don't really push role play. And it's a lot of players, and I see this in some games, if like you and I can play off of each other and have a steady dialogue and banter back and forth in character. But a lot of people, especially when they're new to the waters, and it may be even longtime players, either don't really relish that, or I've heard some people say, I'm not that quick to come up with the banter back and forth. They like the calculating moments of pause or the in-between time and to formulate what they want to do on their turn. So, I'm saying that they could still have an experience of as a character inside of a turn-based mechanical world, and then it had minimal reliance on role play in character, and so we're on my preference and my understanding. I can agree with you. I still think it's still a valid thing for some people. And like even in Robert and Peace, I noticed, and I'd heard him a long time ago. I think on one of the Facebook groups, he had mentioned something about basically giving a voice to those who can't say speak narratively. That you have your statistics to roll off of for that character.
Sure, right.
You know, I mean,
yeah, I mean, we talked about like charisma. I don't expect you to actually seduce me as the GM when your character needs to seduce another NPC. That's why we have statistics. So you can be more charismatic as a hero in a fictional game than you are in reality, right? Or I don't expect you to be able to lift a 500-pound portcullis off your ally in real life. That's why we have strength, you know. So those things have to mean something. So I've heard people talk about this in old D&D. None of those scores are relevant. You roll them up randomly. They might have a math score that affect the game or positive or negative adjustment, but they don't have to inform your character in any way, shape, or form. And I would argue, yeah, because you don't have to role play, right? I do. I mean, I look at those attributes and I say, okay, you know, it makes sense here. My guy's 18 strength. You know how rare 18 strength is? I'm going to have to play this guy like a strong guy. I mean, 18's rare. So that's my take. There's no rules for that. But I probably would do a disservice to the table if I had a guy with 18 strength and I played him like a weakling. If that makes sense. And let me tell you why. Because who in the party is going to ask me as the weakling to lift the portcullis, right? That would be like, you know, so you're obligated, unless everybody can see your character sheet, to inform the table, inform the culture of play, what your character is also, in a way, predisposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe we're touching on two different things here. Whether you play to your character's attributes,
well,
you know, and accordingly parallel.
That's in reference to games that don't require that do not mechanize role playing. And I'm going to argue that's 90% of the games that exist in the world. They don't mechanize role playing. They don't ask you to role play at all.
100% agree. Yeah.
When I look around at the experiences I've had over the last, I will say 7 years, including the opportunity to run and play all kinds of different role playing games I had never previously had a chance to. The ones that demand, I would argue, ubiquity, Hollow Earth Expedition, Blood and Bone, games that actually ask you to choose these things, right? You get to pick them. It isn't random. You don't get screwed. You're not given the drunkard. You can pick the flaw, drunkard, right? But now you have to partake in that. You don't get to pick drunkard and then never suffer being a drunkard and never play being a drunkard, right? And if you do those things, you should get rewarded, because it's incredibly difficult in a game situation to punish somebody for not being the drunkard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, like last night, to get back to your original point, last night you were pushing the boundaries of how far you could be the character that you are. And to me, I didn't see that as pushing boundaries, because I know what your character is, and I know from your drive and our lack of connection in the party that I would almost expect you to be opposite me.
Yeah. That
doesn't stop us from figuring out how to do our job together. But I would have been disappointed if you didn't play what you were playing, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total
sense. And I've
sense.
sat at 5e tables where they all have 4 backgrounds. They have an ideal, and they have a thing, and they have a thing, and they've rolled them up, and they make these characters, and they're so excited, and they don't ever adhere to anything that isn't mechanically
it's like they're not cognitively aware of what the attributes lay out for them, or how they define the character.
Right.
And the most blatant disregard as far as in play is intelligence. If you have a low intelligent character, people are still, even when they first conceived the game, it was still, you were playing an avatar of yourself, and you were trying to figure out what was going.
That's right. That's why puzzles for me in games don't have to be real puzzles. As a GM, I never design games that have real puzzles in them. I mean, that's horseshit. I mean, what happens when half the people at my table are too stupid to figure out the puzzle? I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to. They're gonna be sitting around. They can't figure out the riddle or the puzzle. We have an intelligence score. We can mechanize the puzzle solving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if somebody says, "Oh, I love puzzles as a player, I like to use my brain. I like a GM who challenges me with a puzzle." Well, not all GMs are smart enough to create a puzzle that's even worth putting in front of you. Right.
Yeah. And not all players are,
Right. And
can
so,
solve.
when I break down role playing and I break down the role playing game, it is mechanized, and therefore, and you have to have a character which is derived from whatever path, whether it's random dice rolls or whether you're point buying, etc. This becomes the mechanism to activate all other mechanisms, and your character gets to engage in those other mechanisms via their character sheet, right?
Yeah. Is adherence to your attributes and whatever the character sheet is important.
Mm-hmm.
But like you've said before, you can't really control how players play a game or how.
Oh no, and I don't want to.
facilitated.
I play with all kinds of people, and I've had great games with guys that don't role play much. They don't. It's just not a big deal for them. That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
This is about my personal experiences and recognizing the value of having a game that mechanizes my role play. Is so much more rewarding because now I can't willy-nilly change that, right? My drive is a particular thing, and there might be a moment in the session where I want to ignore that drive, or there might be a moment in the session where the drive is going to hurt me to tell the king to go F himself because I don't believe in authority, right? Although last night, as I needled the lady, right, and Robert said, "I appreciate your sense of humor, Elf." I was needling her. In a way, I was deriding her in a very low key way, because I don't adhere. I mean, I'm not aggressively insubordinate or nasty like I am to your character, because your character is I'm familiar with your character, and you have no power over my character, right? So there were moments last night that I was able to get that through, and Robert picked up on it, right? And he had her play it off as humor, right? That I was jiding her, so to speak. What's the right term? I can't think of the right term. And to me, that's part of the demand on sitting at this table to play this rule set with these mechanical devices of drive, connection, etc. Does it have to trump all other activity? Of course not. You never want to be the my guy that wrecks the focus of the session, right? But versus the vanity traditional, and again, I don't say this lightly because my passion has always been OD&D, and it's always been OSRs, and it's always been basic fantasy, but that's all vanity, right? I'm a choleric, I want to be a zealot, and I play a zealot choleric, but it's not demanded of me, and it doesn't require me to be anything other than a name and a character who uses turn undead and heals and blesses and right. There's no other, and so what I play is solely for the sake of enjoyment for the other players at the table or the GM, or out of vanity, so to speak, right?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because more where I was thinking more in line of attributes and how people don't adhere to that as attributes. That when you have mechanical systems that bring to the forefront that you're supposed to, or you're to declare what your character is, it brings to the forefront in the player's mind their impetus for being there and their connections with the other players, which I think is important, because a lot of times whenever you go into role playing a character, to be true to that role play, you're going to have a lot of moments where you butt heads, as an example of last night. But you have to have something that kind of ties it in. That's why I like the aspect of peace, that there has to be something, there's some thread that will keep the party together, because there's all, but lets them be elastic enough to where they can bounce, but they know that ultimately for the greater good that they have to maintain. And so he sets that mark at the start that they follow. So I really appreciate that. When I first encountered things like maybe like in Hex, when you have flaws, or I know other games happen too, and as far as personality aspects, and to play up to that personality aspects and things like fudge points, which is the first time, we refer to them as beanies. I had a negative reaction to that because it felt like Scooby snacks to me. It felt like you're going to play something. It was giving me a reward for, it felt hollow, that I was playing for the sake of the reward itself, for playing this character.
Right. And that's how I've always GM'd, and that's how I've always played. But that comes back around to why mechanics matter and why. Well, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've had a different look at that because I see the necessity of it. Because after years of playing it, and nobody starts in a regular OSR game to really, it's as far as in my capacity, in my history of it, of really adhering to your stats or your abilities, in more of a character building
it just doesn't matter.
Way. Yeah, it's
it
irrelevant.
Doesn't matter. 5e, it doesn't matter. Okay, there's inspiration. I think 5e has inspiration, but it literally doesn't matter. You can be the greatest role-playing actor in Holmes D&D as the young acolyte cleric, and we're all going, wow, cool, but it doesn't mean shit. It's just one guy's a good actor while he plays, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that's wonderful. It makes the game more engaging for me. I like to be engaged in character. So I like to be in character, right? And therefore, because that helps me focus on the fiction, it helps me focus on the, I call it immersion, but it helps me concentrate on the table. It helps me concentrate on you and on David and on Robert and the lady and the things going on, right? I visualize it. So, but it's not required. And some games say, well, yes, it is required. If you don't do it, we won't punish you. But if you do it, you're going to benefit because the whole table's going to benefit. And then you think of the best games you've played in old D&D your whole life. What made them the best games? Let's forget anything you've played new, anything outside of, let's say, OSR or OD&D. What's been the best old D20 or OSR game you've ever played, and what made it great?
Well, before I started playing online with you guys and really started playing in character, the best moments in the style that I played without much narrative in character play was the moments when we barely got away. It was all mechanical to win somebody on one, the last hit point, barely beat something or crawled out of a place or some kind of a fantastic.
Right. And psychologically, that's competition. Yeah. So what are you feeling psychologically when that occurs? Competition. That's what you're feeling, right? That's an actual psychological effect. You're feeling what it's like to just win the game. Just hang in there, man, and just that. So that's actually the reward of competition, ironically. Right? Although you're not really in competition with the GM, you're not supposed to be, but
it's the thrill of victory.
It's the thrill of victory, and it's that was sweet, right? Psychologically, but not every game you've ever played could possibly have come out that way. Most of them you die, or most of them you succeed to the next session to do the further thing, which is pursue the next mark on the map and then slay that creature for that amount of XP, that amount of, right? That's the traditional benchmark. And
stay alive while you're doing it.
Right, right. That's nothing wrong with that. Again, again, no judgments here. What I'm trying to say is, so of all of those games, what made those sessions the most rewarding? What made those sessions? I'm asking because I don't know for you.
Yeah. For me, it was literally those moments and those times, or either. at times when I gamed the system and I was smarter than the DM. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or unraveled his intricate plot by finding a loophole, in the mystery that he had.
And that is what creates, and that's what's that ironically, I think is much of the player GM adversarial relationship right there in a nutshell. And I think that's where players very often feel railroaded because the GM will ignore or will trump their more successful play, right? There are GMs that if you did that to their game, they would find a way to quantum over a different answer and detour your very successful plot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's, I do appreciate. Well, I won't branch off about it. The feeling of euphoria that you get in those moments is a little bit. I remember, like, when you play a video game. Like I remember playing Risen, and I was going down this side of the mountain, and this mountain gorilla would step off, and I was at the point to where I would take one step forward, he would step off and start to come toward me. I would take one step back, and he would turn around. So I would take one step forward, send an arrow, take one step back, and just did that until he died. You see what I'm saying? So I felt like I had beat the game, or had outsmarted the game. So those moments for me, traditionally when I would play, it would be something to that effect, that it would give me a good feeling, or a feeling of barely escaping and have a story to get away, unscathed. And probably third to just, it's funny because we used to play with a guy who he would play in character. And it's funny now because I do it, but he was the bane of our group. We felt like he was the guy that was tearing us apart, because simply after we would get off the road, we would go nothing but business, and he would want to go to the tavern and drink, and usually get in some kind of a bar brawl and whatever that would throw what the DM had prepared off and what we wanted to do, which was go in there and dive and delve to dungeons and to take care of the business at hand. Mm-hmm. But we wasn't playing in character. And that's essentially
sure.
Those little aspects of it are what drives me, but it's a totally different experience now. And I find
so let's talk about Ash, for instance. So Ash is a remaster of AD&D 1, basically, or AD&D 2 kind of remaster with a lot more stuff, right? A lot more, certainly built-in, pages, right? Built-in world, built-in setting, but it's really a remaster of AD&D, right? I think the rule set. I mean,
first edition, I believe. Yeah.
Right. OSR of AD&D, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you create a class, typical roll, right? 3d6 or whatever you do, 4d6 throughout. I don't know what the character gen is, and you pick a class. I'm assuming, right? The traditional thing, you select a class, right?
Yeah. There's the base classes, and then there's specializations within that class.
Right. Okay.
Fighter,
so again,
hunter,
anything that mechanically demands role play adherence, anything.
No, there's a restriction to it. The character I'm playing now is a hunter, and my first character died. Right, so we're out there in the wilderness, and I had to pick up with another character. My first inclination was to have, because it was in a snowy wasteland, somebody who had been a trapper, still part of the clan, but lived on the outskirts, trapping, and would come in and bring his catch. But he was a little bit snow blind, a little bit old. Sure. You know what I mean?
All yours. But let me ask you, is that all yours, or is that in the book?
That's all mine.
That's all yours.
I have to be at the age of 21. There's requirements that when you start out.
Right.
You have to be a certain age. You have to be, you see what I'm saying? So
right.
It really hampers you mechanically on what your vision may be for this character. You can add a personality, but there's no mechanical.
Right, but if you tell me you're snowblind, right?
That's me adding it to
right.
it. Yeah,
but there's zero mechanical effect to that. And you could just choose to ignore that you're not snowblind at some point, just kind of forget about it and ignore it, right?
Yeah, the only way it's really strange because when I play games like this, and even in some of the games that prompt me, like Hex, I can pick up these flaws, and generally I'll try to my conceptualization of the character. I find it more interesting to wrestle with my demons, the character's demons, as well as the resistance he's facing in the world, and how does he overcome what he's facing, and you know what I mean, and himself in those moments. So I will almost preload myself down psychologically with this character's profile, mental profile, and it's all I end up role playing to a certain extent this character that I have in my mind that is not really even mechanically represented in some of those games, because the mechanical representation that you can pull from in those games are limited, in what they offer me. So I have to conceive of something additional.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's not a knock. I'm just trying to make a note as to the difference between, Holmes, Dungeons and Dragons, and Ubiquity, and a game like Modern Age, which demands 4 or 5 adherence to 4 or 5 things that are character issues that have nothing to do with your combat, your brains, and your skills. That they're like 4 in Fantasy Age, and so
I know I'm going deeper, but
right, so I'm just trying to differentiate. I mean, the difference mechanically, right? Because that's what we're trying to talk about, is the difference between what we're experiencing in Peace and what we're experiencing in ASH. So it's not different than AD&D in the sense that there's no adherence to particular character flaws, character role playing, right? I mean, it's in that sense it's traditional.
Yeah. There's in my mind, there's traditional gaming that doesn't role playing or any aspects or any mechanical aspects to get you to that begs the question to say, will you role play this character, and prompts you that as role playing prompts for you to develop a character, you will have those games like Ash and like even Blood and Bone does this.
So with that said, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were
No. I'm just saying that to me is great. It raises the bar for role playing. I wanted to add this because we are speaking of Dark Age Man somewhat, and I remember the game we had with Justin. I think who was running that game? The last game was me and you and Justin. Brian was running it.
Brian.
Okay. Well, at one point in time, I had started playing off of the thing because when I started drinking, my character loved the drink. The concept of the character was more of a bard. Now, I remember at a time when Justin said, he's really playing up this thing about the drink, but when the game doesn't even require it. Now, in our game, we don't add these prompts for role playing, because certainly the freedom for me is that I am able to conceptualize any kind of character, flaws, and everything that I want to inside of it.
In our game, our game, it does not mechanize. It does not mechanize role playing in any way. We have a very simple attribute system that should inform the GM and the player how we're going to call those things into play when a player declares something. It is vanity ultimately, and I can make a 3 prestige knight. You can make a 3 prestige bishop. We both only have 3 points in prestige. We have no points anywhere else. And of course, I can declare my character is tall, lean, young, inherited the land from his father. He's a freeman knight, and you're a squatty, middle-aged father bishop at a chapel, of the church, bishop at the church that travels, a wandering bishop, friar, whatever.
The same way,
and if you declare it, it's true, and if you play it, it's true. But nobody's going to say to you, wait a second, I thought you were a kind of drunk. Last 2 sessions you were drunk. You haven't been drunk this session. What's going on, right? So there's nothing to make you adhere to those things, right? And so again,
Correct.
I'm not judging whether we should or we shouldn't. I'm just saying the experiences. Now, our game is designed to say what you are is true, what you where you spend your points, and what you declare you are is true, and what you declare you're doing in action and declaration of action is also true until proven otherwise, right? So we don't mechanize it, and again, this would come back to a question I wanted to ask a minute ago,
Yeah.
so I like to play in character. I don't care what I play in character. I always devote myself to the character, even if it's super lethal and they're going to die in 5 minutes, right? I just do. I don't necessarily have to emote, and I don't have to have role playing moments, right? I mean, I can play Joth. I can play Joth every weekend, and I will be my character when those opportunities arise, and I will think and act like my character. To the detriment maybe of my character, or to the maybe even to the party as my character gets killed because he does something stupid, right?
Yeah.
There are people who would say they don't want to, they can't play with people like that because they're playing to survive the world in a party to do a thing, and therefore we are a detriment as role players to that culture of play, to that design mechanism, right? If I make a Holmes choleric and I say out loud that I refuse to turn undead. I'm a cleric, and I'm devoutly devoted to my God, but I don't like to turn undead, and I only do it when it's at 100% have no choice.
Yeah.
And we
When your
get
back's
to, and
against the
I
wall.
tell, and the party's kind of aware of this, and it's vanity talk. But then we get to a fight with skeletons, and and Joe screams, "Jason, turn the undead!" And I say, "No, I don't. I will not turn the undead. I don't. I don't do that." Right? They would
Yeah.
go, "Screw you, dude. That's your role." Right?
Yeah. That's your position within the party.
Right.
Yes.
But as a character, as a human being, I might not like turning undead. Right? So
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
question I have about role playing games versus role playing, right, is we do not need role playing to role play games, right? We just don't, right? You need to be a class and a character, mechanically making decisions that somehow adhere to what the cultural play it's going to take to succeed or to achieve the goal for the whole party. Would you argue that's what the game is?
Essentially,
Right.
I mean, essentially they're built
Right. So when you
as
get the
that.
guy who says, "But I'm going to the tavern to get drunk,"
Yeah.
as a
You feel like he's
character,
throwing a huge monkey wrench.
I say that is not adhering to the game. That's not adhering to the thing we're trying to achieve, which is get back to the dungeon and slay the dragon so we can save the village. Your getting drunk is something else. I'm not you personally, but I mean, you're
Now,
that character going to
yeah,
the end to get drunk. Okay.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
so
That's
this
the
is
way
where
I
you
felt in
say,
the time.
this is where I even say, okay, even if we're about role playing and your character does this between dungeon shifts, I say, but I'm not reading that fantasy book, right? We don't read stories about the guy that hangs out in the tavern and gets in tavern brawls, right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
is pointless. Not only even as role play, that's pointless, right? It is as a game, as part of the game, it's pointless, right?
See, the thing with me that I feel like we're trying to do, and maybe you're putting a finger on it here, is to try to not make it pointless, make it something that is integral to the experience. And to me, like when I mentioned the snowblind, what I had conceptualized, that would have been somebody that I could easily dropped in because I would have wanted to give voice to this character, not because it was mechanically required of me, but
Right.
because I found it interesting to give voice to it.
Yeah.
And whenever I would role play him, I would role play him with consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time he would stop if he was a drunk and would stop drinking is if something was traumatic that would happen. It would be a pivot point in his life to where he would change it. The same way you may not want to turn beast and then it may kill a loved one. And then you see the error of your ways and then want to turn everything on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
So really for me to sink into a headspace, to have a worldview that's even different from mine, from these perspective characters that I'm embodying and I want to experience,
Mm-hmm.
is the point of the game. So really the prompts I would say in Dark Age of to play mechanically in a narrative voice or position is a non-essential. Would you agree to that,
It's a non-essential to play
as far as making it mechanically? Now,
I'm not certain I understand your question.
No, I mean, as far as adding anything to Dark Age of, as far as Dark Age of having a lack of narrative prompts.
Oh, Dark Age of man doesn't lack anything. It is identical to every traditional role-playing game that's ever been written, right? Except it doesn't have drive, motivation. It doesn't have those features, and there's no rewarding for those features. We reward for repute, acts of repute, good or bad. Those acts of repute, if witnessed, and you begin to develop a reputation via repute, you're going to score an attribute point, which actually elevates your character in the world, right? Because once I hit 4 strength, there's no one else. It's all relative. I'm one of the strongest men in the world, right? When I get to 4 strength.
Yeah.
When I get to 4 prestige, only circumstances keeps me from being pope or king, right? With 4 prestige, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so because we make it clear, 0 is you have very little value to the world in that remark, but as you spend your attributes, your character, if you run into another character in the world with 4 strength and you have 4 strength, you're equally as it is relative. It's not like it's not I mean it is commiserate, right? My 4 strength and your 4 strength make us 2 of the strongest men, right? That in our neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. No matter how you define that strength, there are.
But our game no different than any traditional role playing game, except you spend you spend your attribute points, and these 5 attributes are all you need to activate all mechanics and to do all things. Our game says be your character live and declare what you're seeing and doing, and the GM will navigate that.
Yeah.
So our goal is not reactive play. So what does all traditional role playing ask for the most part of players? React to what the GM does. The GM throws actions at you, you react. You plot, you plan, you scheme, you react, you debate, you decide, you figure it out, you react. We're saying the players should be acting and the GM is reacting, right? The GM is saying, "Whoa, you're gonna have to get on that. Okay, you're doing what? Okay, well, that's gonna be a nigh impossible thing. What you're trying to do right there. You know what I mean?"
Exactly, but that takes that's. I'm glad you said that because it was on what I was wanting to spew out a second ago. Is on the surface it can look very traditional, but the game is a narrative prompt. When you take that 1 dice and you roll it, your percentage or odds based on your attributes or your modifiers can give you an extra edge in percentage. But when that die is rolled, when the die is cast, it will change your set of circumstances to which you have to reply to.
Yes.
You have to reply to, you have to envision what's going on here.
Right. And there is no stalemate. You're either going to be successful or you're going to fail. And that failure can look all kinds of ways.
It prompts
but your success,
narrative
ironically, can only look the way the player
envisions it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if the player says, "I'm going to pick the lock," and I say, "Okay, this is a average lock," and you roll and you say, "Okay, I picked the lock." Success. You've picked the lock. You fail. Oh, I can come up with 1 billion different ways of what that failure looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean, if I was on the deck of a rolling ship and then, facing some other pirate or whatnot, and then I roll and fail that roll. See, the player has to own his character's successes as well as his character's failures, because it's just a change of situations. If I fail that roll and it's declared that I lose my footing and I fall down, and all of a sudden he's above me and I'm at sword point, now the situation has changed. What do I do? I have to think as a player, what are my actions? I'm reaching for anything, whether it's a rope or anything, a board or whatever, trying to sweep his leg, do
Right.
whatever. It's just a change of situations.
Right.
So that really prompts a narrative back and forth
Mm-hmm.
that has to be live and in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that encourages in character play.
Oh yeah.
By default.
Yeah. But mechanically, our game is. I mean, as far as the tradition of making a character, not telling you that you have to pick a motivation or a drive or a flaw. We are incredibly traditional. We just don't roll up a character randomly. You get to select your 3 points and put them where you want them, and then we inform you in the rules as to what what 2 prestige looks like in your social rank, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And we leave it for you to choose what that poor weapon is. Is this a sword? Or is this a short sword? Is this a spear? Is this a, again, you begin the process of defining your character through the I won't say vague, but the vagueness of the lack of detail, so you can define your character in the space. Then of course we expect you to play your character in the space authentically, genuinely, with integrity, hopefully in character, right? And live, right?
Yeah.
Live. You don't pause the knight in the middle of wanting to cut your head off. You don't get to pause and debate, well, how do I deal with this knight who's about to cut my head off?
No, that's the beauty of it, Jason, because you are live and there's no pausing and waiting and weighing of the odds.
Right. So how we play our game is really the difference versus mechanics. Our mechanics aren't different than any game. It's how we're trying to play it, or how we're trying to get players to play, and how we're trying to get GMs to react. But to get back to our original point off of Dark Age of Man, so to speak, I don't think you need those things to role play. Of course, I've role played Monopoly. I've role played in Status Pro Football as the coach of the Raiders. I'll role play. It's just what I like to do, right? To get into the whole feel of it, right? It's like why I prefer to read versus watch, because reading fills my whole brain with the imaginative, all the imaginings, right? Versus when I see it in color on TV, I only see what they give me. And if it's great, wow. If it's shit, it's shit. I can't get around the styrofoam tombstones, right? If the guy bumps over a styrofoam tombstone in a movie, there goes the suspension of disbelief. It's gone, right? So back to my original point. So if role play is quite literally unnecessary, right? Correct. You're role playing because you're a character in a party with a role, and you're going to make decisions that will define your character. And this is one of the things I want to talk about. So I like to play in character, which means I like to emote and process all the information I get from my GM or my other players in character, not as a player navigating the space. So the difference between me when I role play and guy sitting beside me, Joe, when I role play, I'm actually processing all information through the character. Therefore, I won't make the best game decisions, right? Because I'm processing it as a character.
Yeah.
Joe is saying, I'm going to process this as a game thing, Jason. But at the end of our campaign, we can track Joe's character by all the decisions Joe made. And Joe never has to emote. And we can look and say, dude, Joe turned out to be the most selfish, gold-grubbing, greedy little bastard we've ever had in our sessions, because every action he made throughout the campaign defined his character. He just didn't act in character.
Well, when you're min-maxing like that and you're playing for advantage, you can't, like I would say players back in the old day wouldn't even look at that intelligence. That was the last thing I look at. I couldn't afford to play that way, and because it's at your detriment. And when your mindset, you may play naturally, intuitively, and love to be in character and in the moment and reacting that way, as I have grown to love to do. Oh, yeah. And this is what we're trying to do with Dark Age of, is to facilitate some way to where it is naturally occurring organically at the table. And that's why my point was that one die roll, that narrative die roll, to see which way it follows. And the players will follow suit. It's been a pleasure to me to see that come out. But in normal games, there's no need.
And I think
in fact, it may be a bummer that people will go into in-character play at the table.
Let's put it this way, Dale. You can afford to be the character you envision. You can afford to play our game from a character's perspective. Totally. Because there is no mechanism that's gonna that you're going to let's put it this way. If I play in character in D&D and I ignore the actual game itself and I just play in character in D&D, I'm a detriment to myself, and I'm going to probably be a detriment to the party.
Yeah.
But in our game,
liability.
Our game makes it easy to just be a character, stay in character, because you cannot be a detriment to the game. You cannot be a detriment to your party. You can be a pain in the ass to your party, right? But you can't make the game, you can't make survivability worse, so to speak. I mean, yeah, I guess if you kicked in the door of the barbarians and said, "Come and get it," and we're all standing in the courtyard going, "What the hell did you just do?" Sure. But I mean, you're not going to.
But that caution is the only thing that in the moment, in real time caution, that will make you stop before you kick in the door, wondering what's on the other side, because this stuff does occur live in a communal theater of the mind table space as it's going on, and you're playing off of one another.
If I played at a Pathfinder table the way I play, and I just don't want to use a particular feat, there's guys at that table that are going to say, "Dude, bring up your fucking game, man. You're going to get us killed." You know, it's like a sport. It's like a sport.
Yeah, you're overcoming what. Yeah, it's exactly.
Dude,
it's a game.
This is the time to use your bow and arrow, man. Right now. And I go, "Fuck you. My character's charging into combat, but it's going to take you 3 turns to get there, man. Use your fucking bow and arrow. Do some damage before you get." You know, and fuck you.
They're not in a character's headspace.
I'm going to sprint 100 yards into combat. Tough shit. No, dude. Use your fucking bow and arrow, right?
That's why I love playing a character that's wrestling with his own demons. Right. Maybe something in my mind that's affecting me, and it's really intriguing when I'm sitting here how I'm conceiving my character's worldview and how he's responding to stuff, as opposed to
now see
like Abernathy and Sarah looking at things differently. You know.
And in our game, it won't hurt the party if you charge 100 yards across the battlefield. It ain't gonna, you know what I mean? There's no tactical advantage to everybody using their arrows for the first 3 rounds, right? You see what I'm saying? So our game doesn't punish that guy, and it doesn't punish the rest of the party for that, right? And Pathfinder does demand a certain adherence to how the party's going to succeed in this adventure, this combat, this thing, right? And that's okay. I'm not, again, it's not a judgment. It's a difference, right? It's a difference.
I would argue that on the flip side, it would hurt our game if you didn't play in character and true to character.
The more you stop to analyze, the more you stop to meta, the more you stop to think about what you're actually trying to achieve, the less you're a human being in a naive narrator seat.
Yeah, and
right now, our conversation is not scripted. I don't have notes. This is not scripted. I may say something stupid. I may say something that I don't quite believe. In another 2 weeks, I may say, I was kind of wrong about that. This is naive. This conversation is a naive conversation, right? I know kind of what I think. I know kind of what I believe. I know what I've observed. I can share my experiences. I can make observations, but we're naive. We're naive every moment of the day, right? Ultimately.
Whenever you are in character, as far as when you're at that table, when you're interacting with your fellow players and the naive narrator that's facilitating all the NPCs and this dialogue coming on, when you're not aware and alert, you're certainly not looking at your phone or looking at the score of the football game over to the side. You've got to be there to be able to react off of the others playing. And whenever you don't react, when there's something weird about your representation of the character that you've built up, everybody has to stop and suspend their belief and go, what is wrong with this? So you want to keep that table. It's like everybody's invested in keeping a believable world set going on and reacting in character.
This is why part of our rules is the setting, because if you do not adhere, if everybody does not adhere to the 1850 AD setting and adhere to the Dark Ages mentality of technology, of pseudo-historic, low fantasy, low magic, low fantasy. If everybody, so part of Dark Age of Man, its setting gives us all our context. So you can be that character you want to be, Dale, but you can't you're gonna have to still be a character that makes sense to the setting. Is that's in a way it's a rule. We're playing in Dredgewater, in England, in this time and place, and yes, your prestige matters. And if you don't like it, that then you should have picked better prestige, because you're a peasant if you're 0, right? And you're going to be treated as such by the GM, hopefully, and by everybody NPC you run into that's not a peasant, right?
Yeah, to the world, to the
so
roles, and to
we
humanity.
do define the space you're allowed to create in. We do define the rules, right? And that's why it's so important. Dark Age of is not broad right now, right? That's why because
Correct.
players need boundaries to understand the context in which they're going to go off and do this thing.
So they can formulate their character in their character's position.
And then there's an integrity to the fiction that holds together, because we're all in the same place, right?
It's the singularity you build off of and out of and out from, to really envision and bring your character to life.
Right.
You have to have a window to look through, and they say, I see who I'm playing.
Right.
And this is what he's got to contend with as far as the setting and as far as his station in the world, and his personality, how it may affect the world.
Right.
And then you represent that in character, and you interact with the others at the table, and you can't afford to dip out or duck out, or go weigh your possibilities and probabilities. You've got to be there in the moment to react accordingly and stay in character. Otherwise, nobody's going to believe you.
That's right. Yeah.
Even in the moments when I was,
Yeah, and this brings me back around, like the difference between what I grew up playing, and I've played literally for 40 years, the OSRs, old D20, and Peace, GM Fiat. And this is something that as I GM now more and as I play more, I want to see less of it. It's been the bone of contention and frustration for me as a player, because I was never a player. I was always a GM. I obviously use GM Fiat. I just don't know any GM that started at 8 years old or 10 years old that didn't learn how to play a particular way and probably exercise GM Fiat all the time, right? It's part of old D&D. It's part of the table. It's part of this culture of play that's accepted, and it's part of this thing that GMs want to give away begrudgingly, right? This idea of power and control. Okay, so I look at Peace and I say, GM's still in utter control, and that's perfect. But the player agency comes from the mechanics that say, I want to influence this king right here. Now, I could do it through role play and hope the GM picks up on it. And I hope that Robert, when I do this, Robert says, oh, I get it. You're trying to convince the clerk to give you the wine. Okay?
Yeah. I'm
doing it in role play, and he says, oh, influence check to befriend this guy. Okay, or I just flat can say as a non-role player, dude, I'm going to influence. I want this guy. I'm going to charm this guy, and I'm going to make an influence attack. His mechanics support my player agency, my want to engage the scene through one of those ways, right?
Correct.
But let's say you're playing Holmes D&D, and you want to achieve the same. The GM can ignore that. The GM can say, let's make a reaction check. What's your charisma? Oh, -1. And they just roll some, roll, and we don't achieve anything, right? We don't even have a chance to demand the opportunity. So where's my player agency in that? Even when GMs claim there's it's an open world sandbox, no railroading, dude, you got player agency. Where? I am reacting always.
It's very little weight to it.
I am reacting always. I'm reacting to the declaration of initiative. I'm reacting to the saving throw. I am reacting to the declaration that you're now in a room with 4 goblins, and what do they say something to you, and I react and I reply, and then we make a reaction check to see how it influences whether they're hostile. It's reaction. I have very little player agency.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Is that bad? No, of course not. We've been doing this for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the gist of what I'm saying is it's very difficult to not recognize what Peace is doing to empower the player, and doing it through mechanics that allows this to happen. And the GM understands that these mechanics will win out. Right, the mechanics. If I roll that fat attack score, and I attack this king 5 times with my influence, and I manage to damage his composure 5 times, I can reduce the king to befriending me, or I can reduce the king, and there ain't a whole lot that the GM can do to stop that, other than spending battle scars, right? Or cheat you, you know.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, a flat cheat you, but
Right.
it's mechanically viable as an approach, and not just some kind of a tertiary, just a
Right.
side peripheral thing
Right.
that you say, oh, we'll roll 1 dice and let's see
Right.
if he get. No, we don't go
And
for
the
it.
irony is, our game does that through your choice
Yeah.
of declaring what you're doing.
Yes.
And then the GM says, "Wow, okay, well, this is a hard, this is going to be a hard check. What's your prestige?" The king's a 4 prestige. He's wearing a +2 signet ring. You know, he's got a crown of divinity upon his head +1. I mean, you're literally looking at a prestige of 7 here, Del. But you go ahead and try to convince the king to do what you want done. Right.
We
have the mechanics to support ours too.
Yes.
Right. So it's ironically, I see a lot of similarities in the way we can play Peace, even though Peace has a deeper mechanical layering, if that makes sense.
And that it makes perfect sense. That's what I enjoyed about it, because when he had it at the top, it said influence. I said,
Yeah.
I love that you taking it off the back shelf.
Yep.
In traditional
Yep.
play, and put it in the forefront to
Yep.
where it can be a viable
Yep.
thing, and it should be the same way, prompts for narrative play. So I gathered from that Robert wanted different.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, there's
way
no
you
doubt
can
in my
affect the
mind
world.
when I read Peace and when I played with Robert the first time, which was so long ago, I really don't have I can't remember a lot of the details. Ivan and I had a great time. I remember that, and we liked it.
Yeah.
But I don't recall a whole lot about the experience, other than I didn't dislike it, and it was the first time I ever met Robert, and we had a good time. And we did, I think, 3 sessions or 2 sessions then, 3, I think.
Yeah.
But when I read it now, I get it. I read it. I say, okay, this is providing the mechanics to support good role play, mechanics to support good gaming. Right? I mean, we're talking about the game is structurally supporting everything we're going to try to achieve at a table, right? And it doesn't get in the way for me. It's really actually pretty simple, in my opinion. The game
It's intuitive, and that's important. It's not.
And so I'm a firm believer that mechanics matter. Systems matter. This is a great example of that, right? But the difference is I feel empowered here without feeling like a superhero, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just empowered by my want to strike down anybody who disagrees with me. I mean, I've played with 5e guys who know that they're pretty much, I would have to go out of my way to kill them. I'd have to cheat to kill them. And the guard at the gate says, no, you can't get past, it's closed. And they decide they're just going to murder the gate guard, right? Because they know they can. And there's no semblance that the context of their character in the world is actually real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No, 100% agree, man.
Right.
I mean, I love the fact that he's built this rule set that may have a lot of moving parts, especially compared to what we got going on.
Sure.
But everything is very intuitive.
And it supports the player, which is one of my...
It does. And it propels
goals.
the player into a certain type of play that is non-traditional.
Yeah. And it gives the GM all the tools he needs to still be the GM. And it's intuitive even for the GM. But our game, on the other hand, again, the goal of... Why is ours so simple? Liberating the GM to pay attention to the players and pay attention to the fiction that's literally organically growing before our eyes.
Yeah, it's
and
electric.
So they're utterly free to handle all of this shit that's going to be happening in the world. Right? My goal is not to handle mechanisms. My goal is to say, oh shit, I've got this seed coming up of the flooding river, and oh, by the way, they're currently dealing with the seed of the bandits. They're marching off toward the river bandits' headquarters. Meanwhile, I know the river's about to flood, and I'm free to kind of juggle all of these things while the players are also in a way creating live or at least acting live, right? So our game has to be reduced so the GM can be in the naive narrator seat and the players are always naive narrators, always. Unless you're playing a story game where they sit around and do writer's room bullshit and they all agree on how they're going to tell the story, which I can't tolerate.
Yeah, they still time out and they
I
still
can't.
pause and they say what and they
That
weigh
shit drives
what
me
would
nuts.
look
Yeah.
would look best or be
and then they make a couple
more
of
in
rolls
genre.
to prove it, right? Some nonsense to prove it. I can't do the writer room bullshit, but that's not role playing to me at all. That's something else, right?
Well, it's all built on the concept of the game,
right?
And you know that's why we try to steer away from the Dark Age of Man being a game more so than experience, because that's literally until you sit down, until you experience it live on the table.
Yeah.
And you know, I know I've spoke with some people who they never gravitated toward traditional play because it was too complex. Let's face it, most people, I mean, I've said it before, everybody pretty much has across the board, when you break out an instruction manual, I don't care if it's for a little card game or whatever, everybody's like, I don't really want to watch that, you know, or the simpler it is, the more of a player pool you can draw from. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's not to the detriment of what we're creating here. Mm-hmm. It's actually for the benefit of what we're creating. Mm-hmm. Because we're making
then our
situations come alive.
And my goal is to say to the player, don't think so much about it. Don't analyze the math so much. Just do what
be in the shoes.
Do what makes sense to you and your character, right?
Exactly. Yeah, be in those shoes, and when you drop into that shoes,
don't stop to say, "Oh shit!" But I mean, what are my chances here that I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get killed by this guy? Don't worry about it, right? It's.
I mean, you will.
What are your odds you're gonna get killed in real life by some guy you'd lip off to? Pretty fucking good, maybe. I don't know. So it's don't think any different, right?
You did. It's funny because like even because we do this in no matter what we do. Whatever game we're playing, but a lot. It's just you're really liberated and let free with Dark Age of Man to do that full bore.
Yeah.
Where you may have to stop or whatever it may be, road checks in other
when
games.
I began to run Naive Narrator for you with Modern Age and then Westwood and we went on to AIA and IDW.
Yeah. IDW, yeah.
Those were joyful, liberating experiences that I never had so much fun as a GM, period. I didn't feel like I was working. I felt like I was actually a player. I was actually finding out, like you were, oh my God, this is pretty cool, right? And there was no right or wrong. There was no victory or failure. There was just this character in a world that was engaging in the shit that was going on, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then when we removed obstacles, it made it even easier for me to focus on those, to make the world as real for you as possible, make the world as organic as possible, to respond to your character,
to be able to interact.
Way, right? It was joyful, and it was incredibly satisfying for me as a GM.
Yeah.
I play a game like Peace and I run a game like Peace, and it's incredibly rewarding. So it's bizarre. It's not bizarre to me. There's no reason why we can't love two different things that are different, right? We can't enjoy two different things that are different. But it's fascinating how different the Naive Narrator GM role and method to our madness is when we do this. And it's not just Dark Age of Man. We did this with AIA for mini sessions. We did this with Raiders of the Lost, that Raiders game we did one-on-one recently. And almost everything I've run, by the way, has been from the Naive Narrator seat, including our Island of Sewell white box stuff. The only thing I wasn't running Naive Narrator was Adventures in the Eastmark for Jose and Eloy. That was all written prepared campaign world with written module adventures, right? So that I was not doing Naive Narrator with, right?
Yeah.
And it's remarkable how rewarding Peace has been as a player for me, but also how rewarding it was as a GM. The one experience I had, which is not to say it's better or worse. It's just it's interesting that how mechanics, when done right, and we see how they impact us as a player, and we see how they impact us as a GM. it's incredibly rewarding to see it all work and to see how and why it works and what comes from that. But it's also incredibly rewarding when I run Naive Narrator and the player, we just don't know what the hell's, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I look back on the game, where you end up by your character committed to doing the right thing, helping the princess, right? Not to help the king, who was a jackass, the true king,
Yeah.
who was the drunkard jackass, but to save her from his irresponsibility, right?
Yeah.
And where that game started and where that game went and how that session ended it's like this is like witnessing shit happen in a real life day.
In real time.
When you get in your car and you go off to work and then you come home at night and you go, I can't believe this morning I ran into that fucking guy, and then that led me to the cop thing, and then the cop thing led me to locking me up because I had a warrant out because I missed my jury duty and shit. Then I was down at the jailhouse locked up trying to get my wife on the... Dude, you have, and then you come home and you go, holy shit, that was not how the whole day was supposed to go, right?
Yeah, you didn't sit down in that game and you said, okay, at the end of this, he's going to either do this or that, or he'll either escape with the girl or whatever. Right. You didn't pre-plot it out. We played in a live, organically evolving situation to where I had to respond to, and you were able to fully engage with me in a way. And when you do that, and when I don't have to get out of that immersion and step back, and I'm fully invested, you feel it. Yeah. You feel it from a very human perspective. Yeah. And you get I mean, what are we doing these games if not to understand the human condition? Right. And each
in
other.
Both Kevin's games, in the games you've run this way, in both Kevin's Dark Age of Man games he ran for us, and in Brian's Dark Age of Man the other night, the difference, I'm 100% in character. I'm 100% acting in character. I'm 100% acting live, and I'm 100% responding live.
It's a beautiful thing.
I'm never thinking outside of that. That is the biggest difference in the experience, right?
Yeah.
But that's not to say it's better. It's not to say that's all I want, because last night and the first session of Peace with Robert running it, and this session last night, I'm also enjoying the mechanics. I'm looking at those mechanics. When I roll that attack number, I'm going, okay, what can I do? Because we're going to fight some crazy shit here. I only got 4 points. How am I going to survive this round, right? And
yeah, it gives you.
It's a different experience, and it is as rewarding and is as amazing. But I'm not in character, but when I'm in character.
Yeah.
In our game, I'm in character the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's nothing to keep me from not being in character. Nothing at all. Zero.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, yeah, 100% agree, man. I mean, like when we played with Brian the other night, we were just in character and facing the difficulties that were.
Yeah, and I just trust Brian to say roll the dice, and I just go, okay, and I roll the dice 16. Well, what is that? What is that with your body? Oh, +2, 18. Okay, and then Brian tells us whether that, hopefully we're going to tell.
What manifests from there.
Hopefully we're going to tell the successful piece of that, right? And he would tell the failed piece of that, right? The goal would be that this is done in such a way that my successful roll, I keep going, right?
Yeah.
So, again, like this the other night, fantastic session. But we should have come up with the answer to defeat the Red Cap, right? That should have come from the players deciding how we can defeat the Red Cap, right? So in what way would we have dreamt up to defeat the Red Cap? Now we have to prove it through our dice rolls and our actions that we can actually achieve ending the curse on the farmer, right? Or on the farmer.
That's why I mentioned earlier about the die being so important. It's not a traditional, I'm going to beat something,
right?
Or it's literally a narrative tale, a cue that will derive a situation. Right. Now it can adjust to it being more in your favor or more your disadvantage. But
I want to see that moment where
Wyatt, it provides truth.
I want to see that moment where Wyatt goes, "I've got the answer. Look at the candles on the floor. I know what we got to do. Burn the body of the boy." And Brian says, and I go, okay, I grab a torch. All right, Wyatt, I'm trusting you on this. And I walk over, right? And what I want to see is Brian say, that may not be the answer. This is nigh impossible. Who wants to make this roll? Right?
Yeah.
And if we
Yeah.
make that roll, and I burn the body, right? And Wyatt's right? It ends the curse, right? I don't know how that's going to work, but it's this idea that we just go and there's this intersection of, that you guys are really stretching out here. That may not be the answer, but it could be, right?
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It defines the truth. That way, the narrator, both sides of the table are totally naive
Right.
to what
Right.
the situation
Well, and
is.
more importantly, who's to say how the curse ends, right? Who's to say
Yeah.
how? It doesn't matter. Right?
It's playing to find out whenever you roll that
Right.
dice. That dice will do two things. When you're rolling it, it passes that torch back and forth,
Oh,
but
dude.
it also decides the truth of the world.
Oh,
So
I'll never forget in our Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I love that character, love that sessions, and I had been a witch hunter. I said in my background, and I started the whole campaign that I had been out as the backup to Frederick, and I had been following Frederick around, burning women at the stake that we thought were witches. Right?
yeah,
Maybe he was right, maybe he was wrong. I don't know because I was just following him around doing it. The game started where Frederick's dead, and I'm a lost soul, so to speak. Right? But there's a moment where I think we've encountered a witch, and I'm saying, I know all the tools to discover that I can prove she's a witch. So I go through
yeah,
all these machinations, right?
yeah,
And it doesn't matter. It's just kind of this shrug, like, well, yeah, you can't tell.
yeah. Thanks for
I'm wasting my
elaborating
time.
on this. Yeah,
I'm ultimately wasting my time. And I said, wait a second. There was nothing in what I said that could be true. There's nothing in what I've presented that could be true.
yeah.
That could
Nothing has
affect this.
traction. Nothing has traction. It's just spinning wheels
Yeah.
that don't ever
So
hit ground.
it's either utter GM fiat or it's a hidden failed dice roll. Either way, I come off going, what the fuck? I've just wasted 30 minutes of my time, right?
Yeah,
What am I doing here, right?
yeah.
And so as a player, those were moments of utter frustration. Because I didn't play much, right? Those were things that I'm sure players have had to deal with.
That was confirmation of why you didn't play, and so
It was confirmation that, oh shit, now I know how the other side of the table feels because I do it too, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I GM that way too. I've been GMing that way for 30 years, right? I'll make a reaction roll.
People are used to. We just said it earlier. People are used to playing that way.
Right.
When you're playing a game totally mechanically,
Yeah.
and then that's why you can't afford to really.
Mhm.
It don't prompt you to play narratively. It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's a game.
Yeah.
The DM will unfold in front of you
Right.
what is happening,
Right.
and then you got to look at your odds and then
Yep.
decide.
Yep.
Look at your character sheet and decide on what
Yep.
move
Right.
you would like to do.
Right.
Take your pick.
Yeah. If I had not started playing over the last 10 years, and certainly over the last 5, not only playing a lot more, but also experiencing in other games as a player to GM, I would not have gotten to this. I would not have gotten to the place where I recognize how much work I was doing as a GM that I think didn't actually make the games funner for people, right?
Yeah.
All of my prep and all of my hard work didn't necessarily make the games funner because you have to understand what is really fun for the player, right? And if I've gotten to this point where I realize, well, wait a second, in a way, players are always naive. In a way, that's the joy and the mystery for players. They don't know the answers. They don't know what they're doing, but they're going to go into that doorway and they're going to go into that dungeon and they're going to find out. And they can only find out one way, and that's by naively putting one foot in front of the other and recognizing, wow, where is also the utter player agency in that, and where am I liberated as a GM to say, holy shit, what if, right? So I couldn't have come here without 5 years of all the positive experiences, but also all of the frustrating experiences as both a GM and a player, right?
Yeah, but through that process, that growing process that it's taken that for me years of playing, and when you don't realize or understand the potential.
Like, there's a lot of apologists for D&D 5th edition. I can't do that anymore. I mean, I cannot justify D20 that way, right? Modern D20 with the bells and whistles, because there's nothing in that process that I think is actually rewarding mechanically, and there's
Yeah.
nothing in that process that's rewarding role playing wise. There's nothing in that process that's rewarding. I mean, that is creating a culture of play at the table via the rule book as well as the players and the GM.
Yeah.
Peace does that. I mean, Peace does it. 5th edition doesn't do it. I've run it
Yeah.
10, 12 times. I've played in it probably 8 times. It doesn't do it. And Pathfinder didn't do it. And, most modern D20 games don't do it.
Yeah.
I would argue Fantasy Age, as much as I love Fantasy Age, doesn't do it. So there's the way the mechanics support the process is a different deal, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that way. I feel that way of Dark Age of Man solely because there are no mechanics. The single mechanic is huge weight. It's huge weight, but it's a simple mechanic, but the weight is gigantic.
Yes, that weight, that die will. If everybody at that table, everybody at the table is naive, and that die will decide truth. That die will decide shifting of situations on a macro and a micro level.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you were saying with the red cap, that would have been a macro level.
Mm-hmm.
It changed something on a larger. It changed a larger truth in the world. Where on a micro level, if I'm in a dialogue or a banter back and forth, and I'm trying to convince somebody, or I'm in a sword duel, let's see which way it flops and see who has the advantage. And what are you going to do? That's why I say I can love getting a failure, because it just switches my current situation to where I have to deal, even if I take a physical or some other wound or at a disadvantage, I'm engaged fully. It's waking me up. My senses, my nostrils are flared. I'm like, what do I do now to overcome this situation? I'm not sitting over here waiting on my turn, whistling, being bored, waiting on the next moment. I've grabbed the bulls by the horns and the short hairs at the same time. I'm like, what do I want to do? That's what's so engaging about it. Even when you're from the naive narrator director standpoint.
Right.
You don't know, and you don't know how they're responding. That whole interaction at the table from players with NPCs, player characters, is a beautiful thing just to watch it evolve. Like you say, you didn't know where I was going or who I would respond to with the king.
And the magic is not motivation. So in our game, we talked about this the other day briefly. In our game, we don't ask you to have motivation. We don't ask you to set goals, because that's a problem. That puts the player in a mindset of that he's trying to achieve a thing. He's motivated to do a thing. What we're asking in Dark Age of Man is you have responsibilities, and shit's going to come up that you have to deal with. And then there's shit that's going to come up that we didn't anticipate. And how you go about that and whether you pass those things or fail those things are going to drive organic play, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want motivations and I don't want goals. I want responsibilities.
Exactly.
So when I put you in Dredgewater and you tell me you're a peasant boy with 3 body or 2 body or whatever and 1 luck, and you define your peasant boy with 0 prestige and he's 13 years old and this, I say, okay, you have no responsibilities. But I and every NPC in that village is going to be telling you what to do, because you're a pathetic serf peasant boy. You're going to be constantly being told what to do, and they're going to throw rocks at you and shit if you don't partake. It's going to empower me as the GM to put responsibilities on you as someone who's going to give you orders. Versus the guy who says, I'm a 3 prestige landed knight, and I say, yes, and you have this estate. And two minutes into the thing, I say, you've got serfs that you're responsible for in your land, and they're all sick with the plague. What are you going to do? Right? I mean, what are you doing? You got to deal with this, right?
But see even knowing the context of the world and your station in the world, that's going to inform immediately a personality. Like I said, I envision where we were in Ash, and this immediately I had this concept of
Yeah.
this person. Whenever you're informed of that,
Mm-hmm.
where the location is,
Mm-hmm.
what your station and responsibilities are,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like automatically
Yep.
you fill in the blanks. You fill that character out. And you go, man, this guy would be feeling this way or that way, or maybe he's, where's his emotion on the sleeves, or he's quick, or maybe he's,
Mm-hmm.
maybe he's really,
Yeah.
gregarious or affable
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever would lend to that, and you play it, but
Yeah.
you have to you're constantly in a dialogue and representing that character, so you can't. It's like you can't afford you snooze. You can't do it, and it's no fun.
Right.
There's
Well,
no thrill in it.
again, in those games, you first play the game, and then you role play when you have a chance to role play.
Yeah, it's a secondary.
There is an utter
and it
disconnect.
don't matter.
Yeah, there is a disconnect, and you're right. It's vain. Most of it doesn't matter. You could
Yeah,
play
you
a
may
drunk,
collect Scooby snacks.
right? You could play a drunk for a couple sessions and then just forget about it and not even bother. Nobody in the party is going to say, "Dude, what happened to the drunk?" I mean, maybe there might be some asshole that would just say, "Why aren't you drunk now?" Right? But
yeah, but you don't want to lose face when you're playing Dark Age of Man. You got to represent your character.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm literally,
Right.
because it's like
right.
you're playing this guy. You got it's a prideful thing when you're doing it.
Well,
and
on our game, we haven't
responding.
we haven't found a way to communicate all of these things in the book yet, but we will. That's why we're playtesting. For instance, if you say you're a drunk and you do best when you're already a little high, and we confirm it, Justin and I confirm it in play by talking about it and confirm it. And as a GM, let's say that you guys are at my table and we're doing this. I, as a GM, would say, you know what? You can't get away from this now, Dell. You've made this clear. Your character is best when he's a little drunk. I'm going to give you a repute score because it's confirmed, but you're now never going to be able to have, but you're going to have a -2 to all of your attributes when you're sober.
Yeah, it's
there's nothing to stop me from creating an effect upon you, but I'm going to reward you with a repute for this. You're now becoming famous for being this functioning drunk, right?
Well, see that happens in play. It's organically.
Right. Yeah.
There's certain truths that are realized during
but
play.
Then we have to
you can't even predict.
But then we have to mechanize it to make it valuable, because if not, you can just choose to ignore the drunk. I could just say to you, "Okay, buddy, but if you're not drunk, I'm gonna affect you. I'm gonna tweak it a little bit."
We're doing there. Yeah. Ironically, we're doing the same after the fact in a post way, instead of preloading it with that and saying play to that.
Right.
What we're doing is saying you will discover and bring forth this character to life and his relationships with the other, and it will manifest as a truth in the world, and then that truth will have mechanical effects because it'll alter.
And this is why I look forward December 5th to starting the campaign, Dark Age of Man campaign, because it's time that we have a group of guys that has a chance to play this consistently and see how the characters and the whole thing can evolve. I think because none of us know where it's going to go, but also. Well, we need that exposure to the how do I say that? To the realities of the characters. I told my wife this morning, there's 2 types of games. There's the game where the character matters, and there's the game where the game matters. Dark Age of Man, characters matter. Every other game, the game matters. Doesn't fucking matter if you're a cleric first level or thief third level. You're either going to live or die. That's it. Doesn't matter. Let's plug in another one, right?
Yeah.
No other game. Almost every role-playing game is first.
It's just flavor. It's just flavor. It doesn't matter.
Right. And in our game, it's character matters, and how they affect the world. I have to track, and I have to be prepared, and at the same time, they're going to influence the nature of the whole game.
It's totally integral. It's not just flavor.
Right.
It's not.
I can honestly tell you, I truly believe that our game is the character matters, in all of the role-playing games, the game matters. The system matters. And again, I've had friends say this ad infinitum. System matters, system matters, system matters. That's the problem. System always trumps everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
In our game, we're saying, wait a second, our system supports play, and now our characters matter, and the system will be, the players will hit that system head on every time they declare something that has to be challenged.
Yeah.
But the system is just a prove it. It's just a prove it system, right?
Yeah, we get enough prompts in the attributes to inform the character and the setting of the world, the context of that. You go off from there. The interactions will flesh out and build. Right. And even the Pendragon map, I love that because it's more of a legacy type thing to where you're adding as you go, and every map could be ultimately different. So even speaking of that fleshes out as it goes.
Sure.
In any different game, you know.
Yeah.
So.
No, and it's been fantastic. I've enjoyed not only working out the process before we started rewriting Dark Age of Man, when we played the naive narrator games, but I've enjoyed the hell out of Peace, and I'm going to continue to enjoy it as a GM and a player. There's something about the nature of this mechanical device for me, right? That is rewarding as hell. And I've enjoyed every game we've done and every game I've played. But there's no doubt as I age and as I'm 50 years old and as I sit down for an hour on a Sunday or 2 hours on a Sunday or 4 hours on a Sunday, there is a particular joy I want to achieve with my friends at the table. As both a GM, not just some asshole working his ass off to make a game. And very often GMs are busting their ass, and it's fun for us, but it's work for the GM a lot. Yeah. And I want to see players not only have that agency, but I want to see players actually find out what it feels like, right? When they're not in control. See, this is the thing. This is the thing that people confuse player agency is not control. You don't have control, right? You have the right to dream. You have the right to act. You have the right to believe it, right?
Yeah, just your statements aren't truth by factual.
No,
right off the bat.
No, and if we get to a state where our book can help teach this, right, too, because if it is something teachable, right? I do believe it is. There's instinctual play, but then I think you can teach these things. You can teach these things by saying, "Do not decide." And we talked about this the other day. In our game, you cannot know. If you know as a GM, you've just fucked the players. You cannot know. You can't know. You can't.
Yeah.
We can know that there's Vikings that just hit the shore. And we know, okay, well, what are the Vikings doing? Well, shit, they're going to raid some village, right? That's it. But we can't know anything else, right? I can't know. GM cannot know how to stop the plague. The players have to figure that out. The players have to kind of decide how they're going to deal with the plague, right?
Yeah.
Why does the GM have the answer and you guys got to fuck around for 3 days until you figure out how to get to the plague? Dude, how many games have you played in where you're really going, Jesus, when are these guys going to get it right? When are they going to figure this out? And the players are still trying to guess the right answer. Don't know. How about this? Don't know, right? And let the players come up with the answer, and then we're going to put challenges in front of them via this dice mechanic that's going to be either easy or fair or hard or difficult. And then there's going to be other things that are popping up in the world on the random seed chart that make their lives more. I'm dealing with a plague, and all of a sudden a dragon shows up. Oh shit! Whoop! Got to reprioritize. Dragon's a problem right now, right? It's a live world, right? Don't know. So in our book, the first line that has to come in, that I have to rewrite in our book under naive narrator, and the job of the presenter is don't effing know. Don't know anything. That's what naive means. We don't know. Right? Yeah.
I don't think that has to be stressed.
We have to. We have to, because if a GM decides how we need to if a GM decides how we need to deal with the bandit captain,
Yeah.
then we aren't free with our agency to figure out how we want to deal with the bandit captain. When the GM decides that he knows the bandit will not be negotiated with, then he's just made your guy with a 3 prestige fucking irrelevant, and you haven't even met the bandit
you are,
captain
you
yet.
go,
And you haven't even met him yet.
That? Yeah, y'all gonna try that? Crap.
Right.
So
when he knows, when he decides, and when he knows, or she knows,
yeah,
you've eliminated 99% of the options that players will come up with that are far more fascinating and dangerous than any shit I'm going to dream of, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know. That's what's crazy, man. Because
people are crazy, man. People get in their cars and they drive too fast in the wrong neighborhood. Happens every day. Yeah. And they end up in car accidents and shit. And you scratch your head and say, dude, you were in control of that. Why the hell did you drive so damn fast in that neighborhood?
But Jason, what I love about it is that could be like at first blush, you might have this anxiety or pang of anxiety, like, no, we got to set up this framework for them to follow this procedural thing. Otherwise they're going to go awry. But like I said before, when they're sitting at this table, just the etiquette of play and yielding to the person who's speaking or who's reacting first. It automatically takes care of initiative. Mm-hmm. It takes care of because you're there live in the moment. That's right. And you're responding. Right. And should you jump in? Yeah. Should you act in or should you wait?
Do you want player agency, Dale?
Yeah.
Then prepare for responsibility, because that's what it's about. Yeah. You as a player are responsible. Player agency doesn't come without responsibility.
Oh yeah, or accountability for that matter too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's totally. I've said it before. It's liberating for me to be live in the moment, in play, and those things that maybe I had worried over, or in the early stages, like naturally kind of keeping the parameters or the bumpers up, they naturally take care of themselves. It's just through a social contract of respect and mutual respect. And,
and that's what I said. Our game in that way, our game is traditional.
But you stay inside the confines and agree to account of confines of two major things: of the context of the world, and the way you should interact with it, and each other, and staying true to your character, representation of your character, especially after you get going with him and you're interacting with other people. You have to, you start looking through his eyes or her eyes, and you stay and you relate to the other way, and you can build up relationships with the others.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. It just evolves on its own. You sit back and you go, dang, I just took my hands off this.
Well, it's like the other night, Brian's naive. He was utterly naive. And he says, the farmer says, I said, well, you're going to have to account. We're going to have to tell this account to the Baron. We're going to have to account to the Baron for this. And he's like, well, I said, the Baron may come asking questions or send somebody asking questions. And Brian, as the farmer, says, well, we may not be here. We don't know if this thing's coming back, or there might be more.
Yeah.
And my initial response to that is Grant instantly was, you know what? I get it. This was pretty shitty. This was pretty bad. Okay, we'll raise the farm. Go. And we've all agreed to lie to the Baron, right? That shit could have consequences, right? But it might not. Baron may never. There'd be never ever a consequence for. We just go back and say, hey, the bandits. We got to the farm and dude, somebody raised them, and then the Baron says, go get those bandits, and we're like, fuck, what bandits? We invented the bandits, so we're out looking for bandits that we don't even know exist, right?
Remember in Kevin's game, we decided to lie to the, and the priest didn't, the pilgrim didn't, so. Right. He's playing through his character. And even when Brian said, when I said, I was trying to play the bard aspect, I said, you got an instrument. You got a fiddle there. Yeah. So he wove it into the narrative about the red cap,
and
connect the dots, one thing leads to another.
All of that. And people have said, well, dude, if it isn't written down, it isn't true. Oh, it's true the minute you fucking say it. And it's true the minute the GM says, yes, I have a fiddle.
It's evolving right in front of you.
Whether it was
You're
written
playing
in a
off
module,
each other.
Whether it was written in a module by Joe Blow 8 months ago and it's just getting printed and hit the fucking bookshelves, or whether it comes up in session live and becomes true, either way, shit is always invented. Always invented. So when somebody says you're just making shit up, Gary Gygax made shit up.
Yeah.
Everybody who's ever written a module is making shit up, right?
But what's so
the
beautiful.
difference is the minute it's written down, people feel compelled to follow it. They have to follow the fucking module.
People want to feel validated, but
do they
really?
I suppose I've been doing this 50 years. Fuck, try to be something other than validated for once.
Yeah, no, well, I mean,
come on, it's
vain. It's a vain attempt, and it's more like if it's written down on the page than it is. It's the same thing you're saying, like in a module form. That is the way. Even though we've all raked modules and did whatever we want to, pulled from them or whatever, or they slipped in our brain and we've reused them later. But it's none of that really matters when you're sitting at the table and it's organically growing and truths are being determined by the die roll from people wanting to do
shit
something.
Up is only wrong when you then change it all the time. So if I say to you, you guys walk into this ritual chamber and there's 3 large stones that stand 8 feet, they're a ton each, and these stones teeter left and right. And then Joe says, and I explained the entire room to Joe, it's now real. It's true. Whether it's written down or I've just made it up. It doesn't matter, right? Joe doesn't know the truth. But here's the thing. Joe says, okay, I'm going to run over and drive my shoulder into that stone and try to topple it into the other stone, into the other stone, into the other stone. I want a domino effect. And I say, what stones? There's no fucking stones here. That's what's wrong, right? So you have to be consistent. So if I'm going to make up stones and I'm going to tell Joe all this stuff, right? That's now true. That's now might as well be out of the module, might as well have been written down.
Well, I'll tell you what, the way we're so ingrained in these games and in the moment there, you remember a lot more about what is going on, and you could step back because you're there, you're watching it in form above you. And honestly, whether you're playing a character or whether you're playing NPCs or whatever, or whether you're describing stuff, like I said, you don't want to lose face. Your credibility is important to each and every one of us when we're sitting at a table in the mutual respect. So we have to have a level of that. That's why I'm saying nobody. And I have nobody fudges or tries to make up something that isn't plausible.
Anybody or any groups that we don't have that. We haven't. All the guys I've played with, they have integrity. All the guys I've played with, I've never encountered. I can honestly say in the last 7 years, nobody I've played with have we not had a good culture of play. We've had a fantastic culture of play.
Yeah, but that's one of those things that is taken care of naturally that we don't have to define in the book because it does happen. The legitimacy of you saying something plausible and rational that could happen in this immediate area, and everybody's involved in that immediacy of the situation that's organically coming to life in front of you. And what are you going to say? Are you going to say Bobo the clown jumps out of the haystack? I don't think so. That's ludicrous.
Well, if they do, and I'll be honest, I have had to say this to people. I've played for 40 years in the GM. There's been times I've had to say, whoa.
Well, you got that.
Stephen, you're off genre here, Stephen, or Stephen, no.
Well, it's
that
a
shit
simple,
ain't gonna happen, right?
It's a simple thing. If I'm in the bar and I say I jump up and grab the chandelier to swing across and hit him, you go, there's not a chandelier. So there's going to be aspects to where something may be rational or plausible.
Yeah, but see, that kind of shit is also, that kind of nitpicky shit drives me nuts. Okay, so it ain't a fucking chandelier, it's a beam, or it's a rope, or it's a net.
Well,
there's all kinds of shit that can be there for a player to grab hold of, right?
Oh, yeah, well, I ain't saying that. I'm just saying on little things, whenever, like, the director can make little alterations. That stuff can happen. It's not a huge ability to correct it, whether he says, oh, you jump up and it's a pail hanging on a rope or whatever, like you grab and you swing. Right. I'm just saying, but everybody, through their own credibility and they will want to have respect from everybody else at the table. So you're going to stay within a level of your own understanding of the time and the setting and in the context of the world, that you stay plausible and rational within inside that world view and setting. And where we've started from in Dark Age of Man is probably one of the most recognizable eras in the Middle Ages.
Well, and that's one reason why it's pseudo historic, because we can play fast and loose with
And it's a
with
little bit
whether it's
flexible.
exactly 850 or 900. I mean, it can be. I am truly not.
Yeah, there's a flexibility
Yeah,
to it
yeah,
that even in different games, it can be certain truths that are in
sure.
one game that aren't in
Um,
another.
yeah, I mean, it's. I guess for me, this conversation again was about mechanics and how mechanics influence not only our role play, but how they influence our feeling uh, of I won't say accomplishment, but rewarding. For instance, like I've said before, the mechanics of peace are incredibly rewarding. And they have been as a player rewarding, and they've been as a GM incredibly rewarding. Our game, the reward comes from literally the discovery of what the fuck's happening before us, and what the hell characters are going to do, what they're going to get into, and how that's going to evolve into a thing that's going to go a certain way. That has been about a certain level of joy. That's rewarding, but in a different way, right? It's in the discovery of the truth, in the discovery of what these characters in this place dealing with crazy shit and other crazy characters are going to do, right? That's a different kind of rewarding, right?
It is, and what peace does for me is it's that rewarding aspect. It's because nothing is ever overdone.
Right.
I get a good amount, an enjoyable amount, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's given to me of when I roll these, and it's intriguing too, because when you roll the dice and you determine how many points you got, and it's intriguing to how you're looking at your situation, and you're going, I want to apply this and this and this, because so you get to be creative and clever in how you and you're looking at it. So, and it's intuitive. So immediately you look at it, you go, this is how I want to do that. But it also lends to narrative play, to where you go back and forth.
Oh yeah.
And you can describe your actions, you're doing.
I think I was most surprised with the first session of Peace. First of all, the first session with Peace with Robert was 4 hours, and we never blinked.
I know.
Nobody went to the toilet. Nobody. I mean, literally, I was in character almost the whole game. We never stopped. And that's a testimony to him, but it's also a testimony to this quality of the game. It's there was no point we were bored or we were frustrated or it wasn't working, and more importantly, when it comes to the ebb and flow in and out of the mechanics and the ebb and flow, we had plenty of room to role play, plenty of room to engage that, and it was actually mechanically demanded, and it was actually mechanically rewarded. So we benefit from being characters in the world and in the space, but then the mechanics are very effing cool, right?
Yeah, they support what's going on, and they're giving to you in doses that you can swallow without going like, "Oh my God, this is going to take 50 minutes for me to determine this one roll."
I mean, that's a testimony to, again, Robert allowing us to stretch out and role play a little bit, allowing us to dialogue, allowing us to get into character, but also the game mechanics, although they're there, don't stop us from that. When I use influence to negotiate with somebody or whatever, it's the mechanics are activated, and we have to say it. Well, okay, I'm going to use influence warfare here to do this thing, but I'm still role playing generally the whole time. It's fantastic. And in our game, of course, we don't want you ever not live in character. That's the difference, right? Yeah. We're trying to minimize your concern about anything other than responding to the world as a character, right?
It's exactly. I'm pleased to see that
which has nothing.
It doesn't
to do with
require
acting. Zero to do with acting.
Yeah,
acting is not role playing. Acting is you're actually going to say lines that were given to you, written by somebody else, and you're going to hit a mark, and you're going to deliver them a certain way, hopefully believable, and they're going to do the same. Role playing, you're not acting. I mean, there's no acting.
This is without a net.
You're a character responding and making decisions that are hopefully based on a character, right? Yeah. And then over the course of a campaign, we can say that we know what kind of character Dell's guy is.
Oh yeah, right? That's what I love about it. Even determining how this character is going to face the trials and tribulations and resistance that he comes up against.
Yep.
And even that's why I said I'd load myself down with like you don't even have to prompt me, man. Like with a prompt of like give him a flaw. I mean that'd be great, but dude, I was already thinking of that. This dude is like
yeah.
He's got irritable bowel syndrome, you know what I mean? And he's got this and that. He's got
and
you know, it's like a concept.
Yeah. And that's brilliant. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's even better when there's a mechanical effect that either makes you deal with it, like Hollow Earth does, like Ubiquity Games do, or a GM who's going to say to you in the middle of the worst time, you've just shit yourself while you're trying to seduce the princess.
Oh, jeez, Louise. No, but
she says, "What's that smell? Did you shit your pants?"
This is really.
And then when the player goes, "Dude, what the hell's that?" You mean you're the one that told me you had, or no, cramps. I guess that's cramps. You don't necessarily.
But when you're playing a character like that, the only disservice you do to the game, especially in Dark Age of Men, when you're there, is when you don't play that character, and you don't want to get it. The joy of it is not.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the one guy at the table that's not participating, do you?
Yeah, you don't want to have assets. You're there, man. You got to be live. The other people are saying something to you, and you got to respond. What would you say? If I want to go over in the corner and sulk for a while, or like I did, piss my pants and go in that outhouse, and you know what I mean, or you know what I'm saying. But it's you respond. See, that's why I own the failures and the successes, because I want to see how he deals with his failures as well as his successes. I'm not here to be a superhero.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm here to have awkward moments that I say, sorry about that. How do we recoup, or how does he act in this situation? Right. To be in that headspace, man, to be even, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun because now that I am thinking about gaming because we're kind of writing a game, although mechanically we've made it as simple as possible. I'm also scrutinizing the mechanics. I've always scrutinized the games, the rules, and mechanics, but now I scrutinize how much they actually are a detriment to what I'm trying to achieve as a role player / gamer, and how much they're a compliment to me being both the role player and the gamer. There is a sweet spot for mechanics and role play, and some games I think hit it, and some games fell miserably at it. If that's what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve a board game, tactical combat game, and you don't prioritize role playing, then you're going to be okay with whatever that game is, vice versa. So I'm scrutinizing it on what justifies my role play, what makes my role play legitimate, what legitimizes my role play, and then what mechanically is rewarding for on both sides of the table, from role play to actual tactical mechanical play. And then, of course, the game we're doing, I'm very confident. I was confident months ago, despite whether the book's ready, fully written, despite how many minor tweaks and changes will go and how much we'll flesh out how to do this thing, etc., etc. We already knew what our game was about. Naive director, naive player, random seed generator, context of the setting and the world is there. The rules for the character generation and what the attributes do and what they mean, all that stuff's there. We know exactly how we're trying to present our game and play our game, and hopefully the experience we want players to get and GMs to get from it. And I would argue, I think Kevin had that experience as a GM. I think everybody who's played with us, or at least our game, has had those experiences. They may not have as much joy as I have, because they might like more tactics. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, and I think in the representation of it.
But I don't think anybody's had trouble getting it and enjoying what we're doing with our game that's played with us. And GM does. I think Kevin did a brilliant job. Brian's done a brilliant job.
Oh, yeah, they did a brilliant job. I mean, let's face it, we've all been playing the same, D&D for forever. And those traditional habits. We're doing something that's totally contrary and opposite that. So it's totally within the realm of plausibility and understandability that somebody would naturally not fully gather what that dice roll means,
right?
In a full context.
The two things we face is making sure GMs don't know. Don't know the answer. Don't know how the players need to solve
Yeah.
this mystery. You can know things. I mean, again, let's not get confused here. Yes, I can know the Vikings have taken over the Barons Fort, and yes, they have. They are, doing their thing. They have a motivation. I mean, don't know how the players can solve the Vikings taking over the fort. The players
Yeah.
may not. They may not even deal with the Vikings in the fort. Fuck that. We're moving.
Yeah, no.
They may
When I
go,
walked
"Hey,
in
you know
the last
what?
game, I could have.
We're going to move over to the other county. I don't want to deal with these Vikings, right?"
That's why you get a random seed roll, because you can just say, wherever you
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
you could run into some
Yeah.
kind of resistance.
Don't have an answer for how the players will solve the thing. Don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, players may have responsibilities like
Yeah.
Nash did.
Yeah.
He was. So you got to live up to those
Yeah, but-
responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, and it's those were the sessions that changed everything. Those 2061 sessions changed everything for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same here, man.
Yeah, and then no doubt, 100%, that was it. There was no looking back, and as
March
a
23rd,
GM,
19th.
aside from peace the other night, that's how I'm going to run everything ever. So
Yeah.
most games aren't going to support me wanting to run them that way. So I'll have to pick games that are that simple that I can run them that way, like AIA, IDW. Sword and Wizardry Continual Light is so simple. We could do Naive Narrator and use Sword and Wizardry for a D20 OSR, right? But the more procedures and the more shit that's popping up, the more that Ash demands these things, the more you're not allowed to play that way. Ash is not going to allow the GM to play that way. He's not going to allow the players to play that way. There's
it's a different
there's too many
experience.
procedures and there's too much shit that you got to wade through, right?
Yeah, so it's more of a tactical game.
So those games are off my list, right?
Yeah,
For me,
it's a different experience, but it's been interesting looking and refreshing myself on different games to compare not only that, but to also reinforce what we're doing here, because even me wrapping my head around it and pinching myself with Dark Age of Man, especially, and to see it coming together, because it doesn't require that much rules, because like I said, a lot of it is taken care of at the table. Just do a social contract and you go, we don't need this. And I initially I was questioning that. Could we? And through multiple plays, it's organically
this is why
evolved.
This is why we must play, and this is why we must play a campaign.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because we have to see where those errors in judgment lay in our understanding of what players will do and what players may think and how players feel about a process that we think is wonderful, natural, that works, and we may find out there are road bumps along the way we need to identify.
Oh yeah, and we need to proof test it too, because a lot of times we're doing these short bouts of games.
Yeah.
And but I would say that everybody who's played it, at least from my vantage point, I know Kevin spoke up one time about the monk that he played.
Yeah.
He would like to see where that goes.
Oh yeah.
Because you get endeared with these characters, you say, where's this life going to take him?
I keep wanting to revisit Nine Fingers, Parvel.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
Parvel I had a particular feeling about how Parvel felt about the Baron and his role in that, and to be ostracized by the Baroness Parvel is an interesting character now, not because of what he's achieved, but because of what's happened to him, right?
Yeah, it's like watching a movie. You don't, unless you can endear yourself to the character and there's character development.
Yeah.
You don't really give a crap about, you know what I mean, the MacGuffin or whatever the heck.
Oh, you never do. If you want to know what a MacGuffin is and the value of a MacGuffin, just listen to Alfred Hitchcock talk about the MacGuffin.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
There's
MacGuffin is horseshit. MacGuffin is for the characters, not for the audience, not for the players.
We're all human beings, and we got to identify with another human being.
Frodo cares about the ring. We don't give a fuck about the ring. We care about Frodo.
Yeah, in his trials and tribulations.
The ring doesn't mean shit to me and you. It means something to them, but they mean something to us.
That's why I feel like Dark Age of Man specifically, and what we're trying to do, even though it's counter to a game, is representative of that character development and endearing that, which is naturally rolls into a chronicle of campaign play that will keep you going. So I have high hopes for that.
Yeah, and I'm a firm, and again I'll say it again. Our game is about the character less about the game. Our characters, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the whole
I know.
point. If players really enjoy being characters in a fantasy world, dude, our game is saying, come be that character.
Yeah.
Find out what it's really like to just be that character.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow.
All right, my friend. It's been 2 hours. Fantastic conversation.
Exactly.
All right, brother. I got to go eat dinner and spend some
Eat
time
dinner.
with my wife. So
Tell Jenny thanks for the loan.
you got it, brother. All right, man.
Take care, y'all.
Talk to you again. Later.
All right. Peace out.